Let's talk about one of the most audacious and, frankly, important prison breaks in all of history. See, this is more than just a story about survival. It's about how 5 starving men, with a couple of stolen rifles, managed to land a blow on an empire that no army could ever touch.
Okay, so picture this. May 18th, 1925. We're deep in the Soviet wilderness, in the Karelian forest. It's just another brutal logging day for a group of prisoners. But the air is thick with tension. Any second now, a signal is going to be given. Just a simple wipe of a forehead. And that one little gesture is about to change everything. And just like that, boom, the quiet forest just erupts into total chaos. 5 men, condemned men, have just overpowered their guards, they've grabbed their weapons, and they've basically declared their own private war on the Soviet Union. Their goal? Freedom. The place they're escaping from? The inescapable Solovetsky camp. So you have to ask, right, how in the world did these 5 men escape a place that was designed to be inescapable? And maybe more importantly, why did their freedom scare an entire empire so badly? Answering that, well, that's where you find out the real battle had only just begun. So what would drive them to an act of such pure desperation? To really get that, we need to rewind the clock 2 years to a beautiful promise that was actually a very, very carefully laid trap. You see, it all started with this really calculated deception. There's this guy, Sozerko Malagov, an exiled former soldier. He sees a notice from the Soviets offering a full pardon. And look, homesickness is a powerful, powerful thing. So he takes the deal, he heads home, only to be met at the dock, not with open arms, but with shackles. I mean, talk about a bait and switch. The promise of home, of a pardon, it was all a lie. It was an intelligence op designed to lure enemies of the state back onto Soviet soil so they could be rounded up. The dream of returning home turned into an absolute nightmare. And Malagov's destination was here, Solovki. They called it Island Hell, and that name pretty much tells you everything you need to know. This wasn't just some prison. It was the blueprint. It was the testing ground for the entire brutal Gulag system that would later swallow millions of lives.
Now, escape wasn't just difficult. The Soviets literally called it geometrically impossible. I mean, think about it. You're on a remote island, surrounded by freezing water. Even if you make it to the mainland, you've got 300 kilometers of swamp between you and Finland. There are armed patrols, dogs, alarms. A 3-year sentence here was really just a death sentence.
And then, in the middle of all that despair, these 4 words are whispered to Malagov by another prisoner, Yuri Vesenov. It was an incredibly dangerous, almost suicidal question to even ask. But for Malagov, that was the spark. Staying meant he was definitely going to die. Escaping? Well, escaping meant a chance, even a tiny one, to die free. So after they managed to overpower their guards, the 5 men realize they aren't just running from the Soviets. No, they are now fighting a war on 2 fronts, one against the state and the other against the wilderness itself. 36. Let that number just sink in for a second. For 36 days, they marched through an absolute nightmare. That number alone just captures the sheer scale of their ordeal. It's a testament to pure human will against completely impossible odds. You see, they were facing 2 enemies, both of them relentless. On one side, you had the full might of the Soviet state hunting them, guards, dogs, even planes in the air. And on the other side, an enemy that was just as deadly, the brutal, unforgiving wilderness. Their survival was a minute-by-minute struggle. Right off the bat, they had to fight their way out of a gunfight with guards. They marched until they literally collapsed, eating raw mushrooms, anything they could find. Their boots completely fell apart, so they had to wrap their feet in tree bark. And then a single act of kindness, a lone fisherman gave them some bread and fish. That gave them just enough strength to keep going. So after 36 days of this, they finally emerge from the forest. They're emaciated, they look more like ghosts than men, and they come face to face with 2 soldiers in uniform. You can just imagine their hearts sinking. Is this it? Was it all for nothing? But they're not Soviet guards. They're Finnish. One of the guards just looks at them and says the Russian word for Finland. The nightmare is over. They made it. They actually outran an empire. But, like I said at the start, this is where the real story begins. Their physical escape was over, but their mission? That was just getting started. Malagov realized he didn't just survive for himself. He survived to be a voice for everyone they left behind. This was Malagov's big transformation, right here. He went from being a prisoner to being a witness. He methodically wrote down every single thing he saw, the torture, the starvation, the executions. His experience became testimony, and in 1926, his book, An Island Hell, became the first real crack in the wall of silence around the Soviet camps. And this kicked off a full-blown war of words. On one side, you had Malagov exposing this hidden hell. On the other, the Kremlin was scrambling to deny everything. They called him a fraud, a liar, and they even staged a fake sanitized tour of the camp for a famous writer just to create some counter-propaganda.
You know, the Kremlin's frantic reaction, all the propaganda, the disinformation, it all stemmed from one single thing: fear. They weren't afraid of 5 escaped prisoners with rifles. They were absolutely terrified of one man with a pen who could tell the world their darkest secret.
Now, Malagov's book didn't stop the Gulag. In fact, the system grew into something monstrous. But he planted a seed of truth. And decades later, when Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote his masterpiece, The Gulag Archipelago, he specifically pointed back to Malagov as one of the very first people to sound the alarm. It's just this powerful, incredible irony, isn't it? The same man who was tricked by a deadly Soviet lie became the one who would expose that lie to the entire world. His personal betrayal fueled a global revelation. So we end up right back where we started. How powerful is one voice against an entire empire? Well, in the case of Sozerko Malagov and the Solovki Escape, the answer seems pretty clear. Powerful enough to make an empire tremble, and powerful enough for the truth to echo for generations.